Good morning. So here we are, once again. Some of us have been here for an entire month, and many of us are just dropping in right now. For this session practice, as Roshi reminded us last night, is an opportunity. It's a very rare opportunity. I think most of us here know that. But still, there's so many things that we have to just be reminded of all the time. And we keep coming back over and over and over. Forgive me for maybe being a little cliche, but I'm going to begin with the line from the Genjo koan that I think is the most famous. And that is, to study the Buddha way is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self. To forget the self is to become actualized by the myriad things. And when I was reflecting on these lines, it occurred to me that they also kind of drew out kind of the stages of our practice in some ways. I think many of us come to practice with a lot of self-driven motivations to begin with. To study the self sounds really good and alluring. And because we are coming here looking to perhaps fix something that we think is broken, or gain something that we think we don't have. We don't really connect with the forget the self part when we first start coming. But after we've been practicing for a while, something starts to shift and change in us. And at some point, we become aware of a self that maybe we have a feeling when we touch it, it's something that's always been there. But at the same time, there's something very mysterious, unknown, and indescribable about it. It's not the self that thinks, it's not the self that feels, and it's also not the self that acts, that does. It's something that Joko Beck describes as the observing self. This is what she says. All of the describable parts of ourselves are limited, but the observing self cannot be put into a category, no matter how hard we try. That which observes cannot be found and cannot be described. She continues. In years of sitting, we slowly uncover the anatomy of anger and other emotion thoughts. These thoughts are not real, but they are connected with sensations, the bodily feelings of contraction. We need to observe where the muscles contract and where they don't. The more we know, the stronger the observer is, and the less mysterious these emotions are, and the less we tend to get caught by them. So I think that being here on session is really an opportunity for us to experience this observing self, and to look deeply at these feelings of bodily contractions as they arise and fade away, and arise and fade away again. And notice, what do we do when it happens? Do we push them aside? I'm just going to listen to the birds. I'm not going to notice this feeling in my belly. Or do we try to figure them out? Oh, that's because my mother did this when I was 2 years old. So this week while we're here, when things like that happen, can we just let them be there? Just Just let them exist and maybe take a look at them. We spend so much time in zazen in our minds. Every single person in this room has spaced out for an entire zazen period. And you're sitting there spacing out and the Jikido bell rings and you're like, I'm sure everyone has had that experience. Our instructions of zazen are to notice the thoughts as they arise and to let them go. But what happens in our bodies is different. We are letting the thoughts drift away so we can study our whole selves, which intrinsically includes our bodies and what they do. To study the self does not mean to come up with some pretty good and smart theories about who you are. It's about really sinking deeper below all of that and seeing what is actually there. In his talk during Daiseshin, Fugan spoke about how we have this opportunity to really hear the sounds of the birds and all the sounds that are around us up here, to really just drop in and hear them without labeling them. And that reminds me of this thing that I heard Suzuki Roshi talking about. There's a video, there's some videos of him that you can find online. And he's talking about the difference between noise versus sound. And he said, if you are reading a book and a blue jay comes to your window and you think, the blue jay is singing over there and its voice is not so good. When you think that way, that is noise. When you are not disturbed by the blue jay will come right into your heart and you will be a blue jay, and the blue jay will be reading a book. When you think the blue jay should not be there, that is a more primitive understanding of being. And I think this is a beautiful description of to study the self is to forget the self, right? Because at that point, there's no one that hears, there's just hearing. Dogen continues, when actualized by myriad things, your body and mind, as well as the bodies and minds of others, drop away. No trace of enlightenment remains, and this no trace continues endlessly. There is no one that feels the breeze, it's just whoosh. There is no one that hears the birds, it's just caw, caw. And those are really nice Zen-y koan answers, right, that we could bring into the Dokusan. And to a certain degree, they are important to understand. But I think we need to adopt this same attitude to our bodily sensations and contractions as they arise. To not label them, not limit them to words. We need to notice when we feel a sensation and say to ourselves, that should not be there. Because these sensations are also part of the myriad things. So put your awareness into your body when something like that pops up. Just let yourself be curious about it. Lean on it a little bit. You don't need to force it, but also don't turn away from it. Just be inquisitive. Let the things that rise just be. Let them casually fall and drop, and fall and drop. Our labeling, as Suzuki said, is really quite primitive, because if we say, I have a knot in my stomach, that is barely scratching the surface. If we really look at it, there are so many infinite qualities of the characteristics of that knot in your stomach, right? Because that knot that you felt yesterday is not the same knot that you're feeling now, or that you might feel tomorrow. It reminds me of when Hoshi was Shuso. He led us in this exercise of, it was a scent ceremony. Like it was the same thing as a tea ceremony, but you would pass around this very rare smelling type of incense that was cut from fungus that would grow from a dead tree for like hundreds of years. And when you would smell these things, then you would have to write down and describe what you were smelling. And it wasn't just like, oh, that smells like a flower, that smells like, perfume. I mean, there was so many infinite qualities to the smell. And that's the same thing with the characteristics, the sensations that arise in us. There's a lot of different qualities to them. And if we could just drop into it and just investigate it without trying to figure it out. Joko Beck also says, it's a contraction in your stomach, not the end of the world. And she also says, what makes life so frightening is that we let ourselves be carried away in the garbage of our whirling minds. And I think that's where we get into trouble, because we have these false notions that there is something wrong with us, that there is something that we have to figure out, something that we have to get rid of. And this thing doesn't even exist that we think we have to get rid of. The garbage of our whirling minds. And that's where we fall out of the flow, out of the natural rhythm of our lives, and we miss what's happening right in front of us. We should trust our bodies more, especially more than our minds. When our bodies speak to us, we should really listen to them. So let the thoughts drift away and just come back to your body, come back to the flow. Some of you have heard me speak about my old piano teacher, Sophia Rosov, who's 97 now, and she doesn't give piano lessons anymore. But I have a friend of mine who's a long-time student of hers, who goes over and helps her out most days, or at least a few times a week. And he was over there once, and I think he was cooking something for her or something, and he just decided to put the radio on because he knew it was Louis Armstrong's birthday. And so they're having this Louis Armstrong marathon. And so I had never heard Louis Armstrong before. And it was there playing, and he said that she had this look on her face. And finally she said to him, she said, "What's that?" And he said, and he told her it was Louis Armstrong. And she goes, "Do you hear what he's doing? He's just putting the rhythm right into his heart." That's what she heard when she heard Louis Armstrong for the first time. So I thought, how can we do that with our practice? How can we put the rhythm, the flow of our lives in our hearts? So I looked up this little definition about the heart chakra. Driven by the principles of transformation and integration, the fourth energy center is said to bridge earthly and spiritual aspirations. And I like this definition because of how it says it bridges earthly and spiritual. Because I think that these sensations that we feel are obviously physical, but they're not just physical. It's not like you stub your toe and that's physical. It's like sometimes your heart starts to race and you don't know why. You get this feeling in your gut, you don't really know why. It's not just physical. So I think the more that we study ourselves, forget ourselves, and enter into the flow of the rhythm, it's a way of bridging these two sides together. Earthly and spiritual, known, unknown, relative, absolute. And we are both, constantly flowing in and out, always changing. I think all of us have probably had an experience on retreat before where we had a profound and poignant experience of our hearts open. Energy, some kind of energy emanating from this part of our bodies. Heat, sometimes tightness. something that just can't be explained in physical terms. And I think when we're here, sometimes it can be really heightened. Our hearts can really open up. And every day we chant the Heart Sutra. And we call it that, but the literal translation of Maha Prajna Paramita could be great wisdom going beyond. Sometimes you see it called the Perfection of Wisdom Sutra, Perfection of Wisdom, but I like this idea of going beyond being great wisdom. Going beyond is the great wisdom. And I think this quality of going beyond is what we have the rare opportunity to do here when we let our thoughts drift away and stay with our experience, with our bodily sensations as they arise. Really examining and experiencing all the infinite qualities that are constantly changing and flowing. And by doing this, almost instinctively, our natural heart of compassion just opens up. So there was this great Zen master, Lupo, and right before he was about to die, he was trying to push one of his students. He really wanted his student to get it, so he could pass his robe and bowls over to him. And they went through this whole dialogue where the student ended up eventually not getting it. And in the end, he asked him, what is your meaning? And Lupo said on his deathbed, he said, "The boat of compassion does not row over pure waves. Over precipitous straits, it is wasted effort to send a wooden goose." I'll read that again. The boat of compassion does not row over pure waves. Over precipitous straits, it is wasted effort to send a wooden goose. So he's giving us a little bit more in-depth look at what compassion is. So a wooden goose is something that sailors, boatsmen would use when they came upon some rough waters or rapids. And they'd release this piece of wood down the rapids to see which way it would go so that boats wouldn't crash into each other. Right? It's a precautionary measure. So why is he telling us that sending a wooden goose is a wasted effort? Essentially, not compassion. Maybe you can think of a time in your life when you have sent a wooden goose, when a deeper part of you, in your body, was telling you that you shouldn't do it. I should really say no. I should really say no. But then you don't. Saying no would be going to the rapids. Right? Conversely, maybe you could think of a time when you didn't, and you did something that you were afraid to do. You took a chance and had a liberating feeling engaging that. So this is what he's telling us when we come upon those points, and we can think about it in our practice when the difficult feelings arise, or something just awkward. We label it difficult, right? It's not the end of the world. Remember, it's just a contraction in your stomach. Can you go there? Can you just go there? When actualized by myriad things, your body and mind, as well as the bodies and minds of others, drop away. This is the natural result of experiencing our lives just as they are. Then we just naturally sit in the boat of compassion and engage the world that we are, and that is us. As Roshi says, when you realize the self, you serve the whole world. So in our practice here, that can be allowing ourselves to go to these places. But here are a couple examples of what that might look, or what that has looked like historically in the real world. On December 1st, 1955, 42-year-old Rosa Parks got onto a bus in Montgomery, Alabama, on her way home from work. The bus was filled up with white people, and she was ordered to get up and move to the back or stand. 3 other African Americans complied, but instead of getting up, she slid over to the window. The bus driver asked, "Why don't you get up?" She said, "I don't think I should have to stand up." The bus driver said, "If you don't stand up, I'll call the police and have you arrested." She said, "You may do that." Later on, she said, "When that white driver stepped back towards us, when he waved his hand and ordered us up and out of our seats, I felt a determination cover my body like a quilt on a winter night." Then it was on June 5th, 1989, the morning after the Chinese military had gone on a 2-day rampage, forcefully removing journalists and killing hundreds of protesters in what would be known as the Tiananmen Square Massacre. The following day, the army paraded its tanks down the streets in a show of military dominance. And you can see a video of this online. It's like several dozen tanks in a single file going down the street. Then, was seemingly out of nowhere, a single man on his way home from shopping stood in front of the tanks, holding his shopping bags, blocking the path. There he just stood. And the tank stopped, the whole line stopped. And he stood there and he seemed to motion them to get out of here. And then the tank tries to move its way around him. He scurries over and stands in front of it. And that keeps happening. He finally jumps up onto the tank and tries to reason with the drivers before people eventually come and hurry him off the scene. And it was in 1992 in Sarajevo, Bosnia, in the midst of the horrible civil war. Here's an excerpt from the New York Times article from June 8th, 1992. As the 155 millimeter howitzer shells whistled down on this crumbling city today, exploding thunderously into buildings all around, a disheveled, stubble-bearded man in formal evening attire unfolded a plastic chair in the middle of Vas Meskina Street. He lifted his cello from its case and began playing Albinoni's Adagio. Each day at 4 p.m., the cellist, Vedran Smilovich, walks to the same spot on the pedestrian mall for a concert in honor of Sarajevo's dead. My mother is a Muslim and my father is a Muslim, Mr. Smilovich said, but I don't care. I am a Sarajevan. I am a cosmopolitan. I am a pacifist. Then he added, I am nothing special. I am a musician. I am a part of the town. Like everyone else, I do what I can. And I think that is another way of saying sending a wooden goose is wasted effort. I do what I can. And what we can do is show up. I think that right now we all need to examine a little bit more this theory in our lives, in the world around us. It feels like every day we are faced with decisions to row down rapids. And I think we really need to examine carefully whether we are sending out wooden geese or not. Are we doing what we can? Are we showing up? Some little good news that I can portray. Something that happened this morning. I'm just going to read the first little clip from, this is also from the Times. But this happened this morning. Statues dedicated to Confederate heroes were swiftly removed across Baltimore in the small hours of Wednesday morning, just days after violence broke out over the removal of a similar monument in neighboring Virginia. People are doing it. And, you know, we're doing it. Just being here in the Village Zendo is doing it, in a way. You know, I was thinking last night that I was about 5 years old when Roshi started practicing. And it made me think that there are people who haven't even been born yet who may someday become members of the Village Zendo. And how important it is for us to show up for the Sangha, for those people also. I know that this Sangha and this practice has completely changed my life. And when you think about it, 30 years ago the Village Zendo began, and today we have a group that offers the Dharma weekly to prisoners in a maximum security facility. Hoshi is doing this amazing work, offering Dharma to the disabled, to blind and deaf, and also deaf and blind people who are hungry for the Dharma. Through the work that we've done with homeless, the sick and dying, protesting in marches and candlelight vigils at the governor's mansion, providing memorial services, even sewing quilts for animals in shelters, and so much more that I'm probably forgetting. But all that is happening because 30 years ago, two people generously opened their doors of their one-bedroom apartment to the world. It's really quite remarkable. And I think we really need to show up and take care of our Sangha, the heart of our practice, so the future generations, the ones who aren't even born yet, can have the same experiences that we have, same heart-opening experiences, and have the opportunity to experience their lives and go into the places that are difficult. Because when we do that, there is a liberation, there is a liberating freedom of going to somewhere where that seems, or maybe that we've told ourselves a story that we shouldn't go there. Just open the doors. End with a poem by Mary Oliver. This is called Wild Geese. You do not have to be good. You do not have to walk on your knees for 100 miles through the desert repenting. You only have to let the soft animal of your body love what it loves. Tell me about despair, yours, and I will tell you mine. Meanwhile, the world goes on. Meanwhile, the sun and the clear pebbles of the rain are moving across the landscapes, over the prairies and the deep trees, the mountains and the rivers. Meanwhile, the wild geese, high in the clean blue air, are heading home again. Whoever you are, no matter how lonely, the world offers itself to your imagination, calls to you like the wild geese, harsh and exciting, over and over, announcing your place in the family.